Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Jim. It's always good to be here.
After that horrible fire that ripped through the village of Lytton in the central interior of British Columbia, a Surrey sawmill is going to donate enough lumber to build 50 of those destroyed homes. Can you give us a little bit of the story there?
Yeah, it's pretty inspiring to others who are asking, what can I do to help my fellow citizens? The company is Teal Jones. They're a Surrey-based sawmill company. They're actually an integrated forest products company. They export BC-made products all over the world. They're donating enough lumber to build or rebuild 50 homes and buildings in Lytton, which is a tremendous gesture. They feel that because of the fire, it's a way to give back and help the community get back on a solid footing. So it's a really amazing thing to do.
Is that the same company that's going to build a cedar sawmill so we don't have to export raw logs?
Well, they're actually well into that. They have some innovative manufacturing capacity in Surrey for handling smaller logs. I mean, like everyone on the coast, they do need to have a varied supply of feedstock for their mills. There are those who see raw logs as having a place in the economic system, and it's really not that big a part of it. I mean, when you see a ship, it might be a big ship and it's got raw logs in it. It doesn't mean that's the whole forest economy at all. It's a really small part. But Teal Jones, if you ask them, and I have asked them, where do you stand on raw logs? It's not really their line of business. They're all about adding value to BC grown, BC harvested logs in BC, and then shipping the finished product out to customers wherever they may be.
With news that all of the clear-cut burning and cutting that's taking place in the Amazon forest, it's turning it not into a carbon sink, but a carbon emitter. How important are BC's forests for keeping the Earth's atmosphere at a healthy carbon dioxide level?
Yeah, and I think the important thing about BC is that it's a vast area with many different biogeoclimatic zones. If you look at the coast, it's very different from the interior. Right now, the map of the wildfires around BC show you that I think every single one that's burning is in the interior, and that's because the coast is a wetter climate. It can have fires, of course, but we don't have fires right now because it's moisture, and where we have fires, they're burning up, they're emitting black soot, and it's definitely not good for residents who live there. It's not good for the critters. It's not good for the economy or biodiversity or anything. But it's not good for climate because it does pose the risk that we are emitting more than we're capturing in Canadian forests. However, that is offset significantly by the coast, where trees grow very quickly. We have, every 20 seconds on Vancouver Island, I've done the numbers on this, a tree has its 250th birthday, which means, there's no cake or candles that I know of, Jim, but that means it's officially old growth. That's how much forest we have. That's how much old growth, big trees. They're constantly, sucking up the carbon from the atmosphere, and that's a good thing. So there can be years when Canada as a whole is a net emitter in forest, but there's also periods when it's the opposite, when it is locking up carbon. So when you hear people say, and I know there's those out there on social media saying, Canada is now an emitter like the Amazon in its forests. Well, you can cherry pick certain areas and say that about it, but if you look at other areas, it's not true. Nevertheless, I think forests will continue to play a larger and larger role in how we manage the atmosphere, and we can, do things. We can pursue certain policies that make us more effective in managing climate through forestry, and we should be doing that.
Ottawa's just given BC $25 million to develop what they call the Silicon Valley of carbon capture. That's part of that picture, isn't it?
That's right. And carbon capture is where you have processes that actively pull carbon from the atmosphere, sequester it into different things. A lot of it is, pumped underground, like in Alberta. It could be captured into cement and left there. It can be captured by trees that are turned into lumber that are left in houses for, a very, very long time, sequestering carbon that way. But we've seen this move to stimulate the BC-based carbon capture sector, which is good because there's now a little bit of a hub of excellence in Vancouver on that. We've seen carbon engineering out there for a long time. And we've seen now Savante, a Burnaby company that got the $25 million you're referencing, Jim. So I think BC is a place where we have been cutting edge in this. And, we want to see the private sector flourish. I certainly do. But there are strategic investments that governments can and should make to push that forward. And this is one area. Another one is hydrogen. There's a desire by the BC government right now to create a network of hydrogen fueling stations around key areas in BC, eventually all over BC, so that you can have an alternative to conventional fuels for motor transport, for light vehicles, hopefully heavy duty, like medium duty vehicles like trucks that are out there day after day, constantly through the day. They're burning diesel. Why not run on hydrogen? And we have that hydrogen right here in Canada from our oil and gas industry. It's really something that we can do well. So between CCUS and hydrogen, there's a lot of innovation happening right now, and I think this is a positive direction to be moving in.
Yes, I remember the hydrogen highway was supposed to start a long time ago. Arnie Schwarzenegger was still the governor of California. He came up here along with Premier Gordon Campbell to talk about it. And while they were talking about clean air, Arnie was walking around with a big lit cigar everywhere he went. So that's that's my memory of him.
Yeah, you're a man for spotting the details, I must say. What a great detail. There's almost a new era in hydrogen. The one that you're talking about, 20 years ago, Gordon Campbell, he was a voracious reader. Every time I saw him, he'd have a stack of books, and he wanted to talk about the last thing he'd read. And I think he must have read up on hydrogen and figured it was a great idea. He had policy advisors around him said, let's get in there. I think it was the right thing to do then, even though over time it hasn't been, a first wave success. But that's okay because we learned a lot about hydrogen then. And companies like Ballard, based in Vancouver, that had, a lot of state support in order to do, federal government, provincial support to do its work. They actually became more successful overseas. They were big in China when the hydrogen highway in BC wasn't really taking off. So the fact that we had a good incubator atmosphere for that innovation, ultimately, because it's a long-term thing, it has paid off. And so I think the next crack at it, when we see sort of hydrogen highway 2.0 come along, I think it's going to be a lot better. It's going to be reflecting the lessons of these past couple of decades. So that's why I think we need to be open-minded about any kind of innovation that makes sense, where we have natural advantages, and that's definitely an area where we do.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. The original Canadians, the First Nations, they want to get into the energy business in a big way, don't they?
In a big way. And that's already happening. I mean, gosh, you look up in Kitimat where the Haisla First Nation has been a key partner of the LNG Canada project. And that's also true all along the line, the Coastal GasLink gas line that goes from where the gas is in the northeast to the coast. You've seen, I think it's at least 20 partnerships between First Nations and the pipeline builders. This is really how, in future, anything that involves the Canadian landscape and economic development is going to roll. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but, the courts are saying, wait a minute, if you have gone too far in the past, you haven't consulted with First Nations, we have some redress that's needed there, which I think is totally fair game. But, if you talk to First Nations, even the ones who are going to the courts to get what they think is justice for their First Nations, they're not out there saying, we're going to court because we want to stop this from happening. They're going to court because they're saying we want our fair share if this happens. Those are very different outcomes, and I think it's important to listen and not just simply assume that, often I think, particularly the very robust environmental movement creates this kind of romantic image of, almost a paternalistic thing. We know it's best for you. We're going to ensure that you can continue to live only in a traditional way and not have access to living the way that everyone else in the country lives. And if you take the trouble, as I do so often, of seeking out the views of First Nations people themselves, I hear a totally different thing. What I hear is, we want to be part of it our way, on our terms, preserving our culture, restoring our language, respecting our elders, recognizing our territory, but we want to be part of it. It's really important not to miss this. There's another example. I mean, at the Nishka, mind-blowing what they have announced with the LNG project, $55 billion project. You look at the Nass Valley, that was the first example of a modern treaty in BC. I remember back at the Vancouver Sun when that happened, it was a big deal. They were able to set up a new government that brought autonomy to their people. They had a cultural restoration movement that resulted in artifacts coming from museums around the world where things had been taken over the last century, put back into this beautiful museum that they were empowered to build. But the Nass Valley is a little bit out of the way, and I think there has been a frustrating time for the Nisga'a people in bringing the sustainable economic development that will allow a longer-term vision. And so that's when we see the Nisga'a Nation and their partners announce in the last couple of days that they're moving ahead with this giant LNG project led by the Nisga'a First Nation. That's terrific news, because the other side of it, of course, is not just that it's good business for them to be in, it's that the LNG that will be supplied to global markets by getting into LNG tankers on the coast will be part of that clean energy transition we so desperately need. And, I know there's always someone who will pipe up and say, oh, LNG is not good for the environment. Well, it's actually way better than some of the alternatives out there. So we don't have kind of an on-off switch to go from, reality to perfection. We have to work really hard and work with the many possible solutions we've got, and LNG is definitely one of those. Natural gas is liquefied natural gas is a solution. So the Nisga'a seem to be pretty proud to be part of that.
Yes, a friend of mine in the cruise ship industry says the cruise ships, because they crank out the equivalent of 1,500 cars worth of pollution when they pull out of port, they're converting to LNG. We have, I think, BC Ferries went to LNG as much as they could, because compared to bunker C fuel, which is one or two steps just above crude, much cleaner.
It's such a no-brainer to replace bunker oil with LNG, and it's already happening. the early phase of that was with, coastal vessels and ferries, which is great. You make them all run on LNG as far as I'm concerned. But the big savings are to be had with the heavy shipping, the global shipping, those giant tankers. Those are the ones we really need to, as the next phase, start to move over to LNG, because that gunk they burn on is just bad stuff. I mean, it's the worst fuel. It's cheap, and they've built the global fleet based on it, so you can't just transition that overnight. It's going to take time as that fleet is refreshed. It probably, I don't know fully how long, but it's going to take decades, right, before all those ships are replaced with new ships as they are pulled out of fleets and so on. So BC, in addition to exporting LNG as a product in ships to go to other places, to go into their manufacturing, to go into their electricity generation, we have also, at our two major ports, at Prince Rupert and Port of Vancouver, we've got the ability to be an LNG bunkering coast, where we've got, ship comes in, it disgorges its cargo, it takes on its new cargo, and it fuels up with cleaner BC LNG. When I say clean BC LNG, I actually mean that, because the Montney shale formation in northeast BC, where a ton of our gas comes from, actually, I've been up there, I've walked this, I've talked to the experts on the ground there, and I've learned it has less sulfur, it has less CO2 in it. It's literally a cleaner natural gas. You don't hear that talked about a lot, but it is true. So it's not just that it's a cleaner fuel than bunker fuel, but it's actually better than the natural gas that they might pick up, say, in Australia, or if they go to, other, like Qatar, or other places that are wanting to be in that market, in Texas. So we've got these great advantages.
BC Supreme Court has ruled the media can cover that logging blockade taking place in an old growth forest logging site and protest. What do the police plan to cover up if they won't let the media in?
Well, I think the media, or the so-called media who have mounted this strategy, they're not really the media. From what I can see, it's kind of the advocate press that is part of the anti-forestry movement. So they've got their own news outlets who cover this, and they've been raising hundreds of thousands of dollars in GoFundMe. I think so much so that there was a city councillor who's part of the anti-forestry movement who was out there in the woods trying to bribe a tow truck driver. And he said, I got $1,000. I'll give you $1,000 in cash if you stop towing these illegally parked vehicles. And he pulled out a wad of cash. I mean, they've got so much money, so they're hiring lawyers, they're going to court. They're doing this sort of thing to thwart the forestry that's being done on that part of the island. So when I saw this lawsuit, I looked a little closer. Is it really the media doing this, or is it some advocacy press that is calling itself the media? It's those advocates who are kind of creating this. In fact, the media are able to go up there and get information. I think what they really want in the protest camps is for media to be able to just roll right in with their cameras, start shooting, get the images of protest out to the world, so that someone in Germany can say, oh my goodness, that's terrible in BC, those awful people, I'm going to give some money to the GoFundMe. It's about fundraising is what it is, Jim, frankly.
Yes, and when people think Greenpeace is a charity in Canada, it is not. It's a profit-making company. So they're just trying to pull on your heartstrings to make money.
Yes, that's right. And the important thing to remember here is, I mean, if you, like me, in the things you do every day are always in the back of your mind, at least, thinking, am I doing the right thing? Is this action I'm taking, a just, correct legal action? Of course, we're always thinking that. I mean, we're not obsessed with it, but it's just how we approach things. What's going on in Fairy Creek is against the law. People are violating the order of a court. They do not respect the courts that the rest of us respect. All of that activity is based on that, and it is, they're asking us to go along with that behavior. I don't think everyone actually thinks it's a good idea to flout the wise rulings of our courts when they happen. I mean, you might agree or not agree with what the court has ruled, but it's the court. It has those powers. And, I think, there's something about the pandemic. I mean, let's go down this rabbit hole, Jim, if we have a moment, because it seems like a lot of the norms that we're used to are being kind of challenged. Like, you can go up to a statue of Captain James Cook in downtown Victoria on a nice summer afternoon and throw a rope around its neck with a buddy and pull it down. And that's okay. Go ahead. You can go to a statue of the Queen and do the same. Yeah, that's fine. Fill your boots. There are probably those listeners you have who would define that as, vandalism, as criminal acts that shouldn't be tolerated, but they are being tolerated. There was a church attended by small communities, immigrant communities in Surrey that was subject to an attempted arson a few days ago, and then a few days after that it was burned down. It's not clear why it burned down, so I think it's too early to say it was arson, but we know this is obviously a trend burning churches in Canada right now. We don't seem to have leaders who are courageous enough to stand up for those who are worshippers and members of these congregations of free choice. No one is out there defending them. No one is out there standing up and saying, there's an arsonist out here. It's dangerous. We need to solve this crime. No one's doing that. I mean, the norms of the pandemic era are distorted, and we have lost something that is, I think, just normally accepted as, how we live. Like, we should go after who's the criminal, who's the arsonist, who did that. We need to go after them and stop them from continuing. Instead, we're getting, it's okay, go burn some more churches down. It cost the career of the head of the BC Civil Liberties organization. She had to resign after she went, I think, too far in some statements about encouraging people to burn down churches. I mean, it was initially, of course, denied. No, it was just some words. Yeah, words. But in the end, she had to go because it was truly inflammatory what was being said from a person who is, normally thought to be accountable and subject to the rules of judgment and good sense that govern those who, have the privilege of being in leadership roles in organizations.
Yes, I think Harsha Walia tweeted, "Burn them all down."
Burn them all down. And
yeah.
Someone's out there doing that. So thanks for that leadership, Harsha.
Now,
really appreciate it.
In
the
Canada,
Ethiopian community of Surrey really appreciates that too, that has no church now.
I was going to say, in Canada, the maximum penalty for arson is life in prison. Because once you start a fire, you have no idea who or what it may consume or kill, destroy. That's why the penalty for it's the highest in the country, along with first-degree murder. So I think, encouraging people to commit arson is not a good idea. We don't mind when people protest peacefully. Something that we are concerned about, you had something that the government might be trying to do, and are you ready to have a lower standard of living because of it?
Well, there is, you've heard the Green New Deal. That was a big thing during the run-up to the U.S. presidential election. Not hearing that phrase so much now, but that the Green New Deal comes out from what I would refer to, I think, quite accurately as the eco-socialist movement. They're anti-capitalist. They think the capitalist system is what has caused any ills of humanity, and it's kind of aligned to the radical ecological movement that holds that humanity is, basically a cancer on the earth. So both of these things need to go. We need to get rid of people and their economy. They're no good. That's the Green New Deal. We're going to shift away to an impact-free economy because big oil's been stopping it from happening. If it wasn't for them, we would be living in this energy nirvana where we'd be prancing about with all the energy we needed. It would be free. We would have all the food we needed. It would be free too. So we've got this sort of idealist term. One of the Green New Deal buzz phrases was just transition. Not as in just desserts, like the restaurant where they only serve desserts, but just as in justice, I think is what they mean. So a transition that embodies justice. That's what I think is meant by the term just transition. Anyways, it's been that sort of highly radical fringe that has been talking about this term for a long time. And now it's the federal government also adopting the term, and they're going to pass a law on just transition. So they've adopted the core concept of the Green New Deal. I don't know if anyone's aware of this, but just out of nowhere, I don't know who asked them to do that. I guess there's some lobbyists out there asking for it. That's usually it. And they're developing a policy framework to, redo the Canadian economy. They've initiated an advisory process coming up early in the fall on net zero implementation. That's net zero carbon emissions. It doesn't mean no carbon emissions. It means that for any emissions that we do have, we have to, balance that out with some sequestration or something. But back to this term, just transition. I mean, when I hear it, it just sort of gives me the heebie-jeebies because I know the background to it. But I have to say, when you examine it more closely and get into it, it should give everyone the heebie-jeebies too. The idea of transition, it implies to me that we have to kind of jettison the old bad economy. But it turns out that economy is the basis of Canadian prosperity. There's a writer and economist, Don Wright is his name. He was actually until recently the head of the BC Public Service. He's a Harvard economist, a really smart analyst. He's just written a major think piece, fascinating stuff called Rhetoric versus Results. If you look in the Public Policy Forum at their website as a Canadian think tank, you can read this piece. It came out at the end of June. Anyways, he's talking about this too. He shares my concerns, it turns out. Now he's way smarter than me, and if he shares what I'm thinking, I'm kind of pleased with that, because he thinks Canada's trapped in this kind of low wage, low productivity model when we should be having an economy that pays high wages. Okay, I'm good with that, and has high productivity, because you need high productivity to have high wages. So the direction we're going on right now is kind of a concern. I mean, he's likening what we have now. Governments are offering up Costco samples to the middle class, when what the middle class really wants is a full course meal. So we're getting this sort of taste of it. Look at the cost of housing, and all the young people who just say they can't find housing at any price. And so here you got this term, just transition, is drawn directly from the hard, eco-left, eco-socialists, becoming the centerpiece of Canadian economic policy. Is that where we're going here? 50% of the Canadian economy, Jim, 50% is natural resource-based economy. And so, you might say, well, should we sunset these industries that are 50% of the economy and expect to get more prosperous and have higher wages? Will that happen? Well, of course it won't happen. It can't happen. And I think, we're talking about the pandemic effect, and things like that are abnormal being normalized, like, hey, arson, yeah, that's normal, no problem. Well, we have the same attitude because of the pandemic to money, free money. Everyone's got free money. It's being thrown at them. And so, hey, that's okay. Well, eventually that debt does have to be repaid, and we need to focus on things that are accessible and not have these sort of either or, the idea that you can't have a greener economy with natural resource industries that are based on the economy, that's a wrong idea. We shouldn't be thinking about transition away from prosperity. We should be thinking about transformation of how we get there, of how we do these things, because I think that's a more useful term. And if we just start talking about just transition, I think it's going to lead us in the wrong direction. That's a risk.
Well, it'll be a 50% welfare state if you just remove that instantly. And where's the money to pay that welfare going to come from? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is scary. Stewart, lots of stuff for us to think about. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yep.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, we'll ask them on your behalf. You can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at talkdigitalnetwork.com. HowStreet.com Radio is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.